I have two words for you. Social capital. That's what we're going to be talking about today on the Burge Report. Welcome back, Dr. Burge.
Wow. I feel like we should have some like theme music or something like that. I don't know what it would be,
Well,
but we need some.
we do actually. So thanks for watching all the episodes that you're actually on.
Hey, it could be like a little jingle. Doesn't have to be long, like two seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is a Church Answers jingle that precedes every
Is
episode.
there really? I gotta listen.
Yeah,
I
there
watch it on
is.
YouTube sometimes, but I guess I don't turn my headphones on for that part. Well, anyway.
But there's actually a whole story behind that because the jingle was changed at one point
Oh,
when Jonathan Howell was still on the show before my time, and
yeah.
my dad, and Jonathan had a much to do about changing the jingle and then moving it back to what it was before. So
People
um,
they like what they like. Okay, just give them what they want.
consistency is a good thing, which is part of what we're talking about today. Church attendance doesn't make you a better American. That's a bit of a provocative title, I know, but we've got some data to back up some claims that Ryan Burge is going to get to here in just a moment. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, Upward. They have been a longtime partner of ours. I cannot speak highly enough about them. They've got a new running program, which I am very excited about. I'm looking into it to do at my own church. I am a runner. Ryan and I were just talking about that pre-show. And I enjoy the activity of running. You might as well, but there are several other activities that they have. It could be basketball, cheerleading, soccer, flag football, volleyball, baseball. There's numerous opportunities to connect with your community through the ministry of Upward. It's an awesome, awesome way to do outreach, get your people mixing with the people of the neighborhood. The way that you can find out more and the way that you can schedule your call with them, which is what you should do. Give them a call, talk to somebody. Go to upward.org/church answers. Again, upward.org/church answers. Link in the show notes as well. All right, Ryan, explain. So, provocative title, yes. As a Baptist, and you are one as well, at least right now. I don't know if things have changed there, but
Still a Baptist.
okay, historical Baptist.
Right.
We're real big on religious liberty, separation of church and state. People should be free to believe what they want to believe. These are all part of Baptist distinctives. I realize that there may be some who are like better American church attendance. What are you trying to say? But I do think that there's something here, and it involves social capital. So explain that, and then kind of lead us into this discussion.
So social capital has actually been kind of bouncing around social science for a while, like at least 50 years. But it didn't really become part of like the mainstream understanding, and like it didn't leak into the popular culture until a guy named Robert Putnam wrote a great book called Bowling Alone, which came out in the 2000, called the subtitle was The Collapse and Revival of American Community. And he really kind of brings social capital is like the centerpiece of that argument. And he's arguing that social capital is like these invisible bonds that hold you together as part of a community, a neighborhood, a nation. It's just the idea that like you care about stuff even if you're not involved in that thing. Like you want to have a good school system even though you're grandparents, or you want the park to be nice even though you don't even use the park. You just want to have a nice community for everyone to enjoy. That's social capital. It's just these, like, I care about things that I don't have to care about, but I want to care about them because I want good things to happen. And so what he was arguing was, as institutions decline, social organizations decline, these bonds of social capital are going to weaken, and we're going to have less social capital generation. So things like the Elks and the Moose and the Boy Scouts and bowling leagues. That's where the title of the book comes from, is people aren't bowling together, they're bowling alone now, and that's a real problem. So Putnam's bigger argument is like, as organizations die, social capital dies with them, and what we're going to be left with are all these little islands of people who are like atomized from each other, right? They're not connected in any way. And it's going to make democracy harder to do because it's like, well, I don't want my tax dollars going to blah, because it doesn't affect me directly. It has no benefit to my personal life. And it's like, that's almost like antithetical to how democracy works, which is like, you can't get everything that you want. You can't only pay taxes for things you like. You have to pay taxes for everything that we do. And I think that's the bigger problem, is that as social capital declines, our trust in government declines, our engagement with the government declines, and I think we become more upset, more distrustful, and we're less willing to help people who look different than us, think different than us, vote different than us, believe different than us. That's not good for a functioning democracy.
And you recently put out a chart that just basically showed, and I forget the exact language, so forgive me, but
Mhm.
it goes. This particular data point goes back to the 1970s. I believe it comes from the GSS, where it's a measure of trust. So,
Yeah,
hey, do you generally trust people, or is it you can't be too cautious? I think it's kind of the language there. I might have that a little off,
that's right. Yeah.
and that the spread between those comments has grown. So it used to be about 50-50. 50% of the people would say, yeah, I generally trust people. And 50% of the people would say, you can't be too cautious. Now it's overwhelmingly, most people are saying you can't be too cautious.
And that's a real problem if you sit back and think about it, right? Like if you so there's a famous John Adams quote where he said, I studied war and politics, so my kids can study engineering and science, so their children can study art and poetry. And what he's making the point is like, if I can spend and devote and sacrifice my life to providing for your basic needs, then my kids can devote their lives to building infrastructure and understanding the world, so that their kids can go for the higher things in life, poetry and art and music and all those things that make life worth living, give it color and flavor and shape and all those things. I think the problem is, if you don't trust anybody, you're always operating at that basal level of like looking over your shoulder all the time about, I can't start a business because someone will steal my money, or I can't build a house because someone will burn down my house. That's a really problematic way of going through life, because it means you can't evolve. Like, kind of what we want as an advanced civilization to do is create beautiful, wonderful, lasting things. You can't do that if you're always distrustful. And think about like all the amazing things that you have to trust people to get to. Like going to college is really an exercise in interpersonal trust. It's trusting your roommates, trusting your professors, it's trusting your classmates, it's trusting the administrators, it's trusting the financial aid office. Like it's really an exercise in trust, and it's really hard to get ahead in life and make advancements as a society if we all just are wary of each other. And that, to me, that might be the most worrying thing, is when more and more people go, I can't trust anybody. I'm like, you're saying something that I don't think you fully realize the ramifications of for yourself, your family, your community, and America as a whole country. That is not a good posture to have. And we should not celebrate that, by the way. We should actually, as the church, I believe, actively fight against that sentiment that people can't be trusted.
And I think this is getting us to a very important point, because when you talk about social capital, and that's a bit of a junk drawer term now,
Mm,
unfortunately. I mean, people
yeah.
kind of use it in lots of different ways, but let's just use it as it was originally intended. This is the person I call if I need help fixing my house. This is the person I reach out to if I want to get my resume out there. This is the person that can help me get connected to someone who can, uh, you know, help me with a problem, whatever that problem may be. I need a counselor. Hey, who do I call? Who's a trusted person I can go to talk about some issues? These are the phone calls you make. These are the people you reach out to. And historically, that did come through a lot of these social clubs in the United States, but it also came through the church. And this is where, I've kind of gone on the record a little bit here and said the decline of, there was a lot of people in the Christian community cheering the decline of cultural Christianity.
Mhm.
And I was one on the sidelines kind of going, I get what you're saying. And I understand like people thinking they're Christians when they're not is a very real problem.
Mhm.
But what also came with cultural Christianity was this idea that the church could be trusted and that there was a lot of social capital built there. So, I understand the theology and I want to have a proper theology. People need to know they're saved, why they're saved, and that comes only through Jesus Christ. Like that's what the Bible teaches. However, people just, oh, well, we're glad they're not at our church anymore because they weren't real Christians. That's not healthy. Like, at least they were going to church, right? So walk me through the corresponding decline of Christianity, cultural Christianity, as distrust rose in society.
So I got in a lot of trouble a couple weeks ago because I tweeted out I should write a book called,
Really? You
yeah,
got in trouble about
never.
something?
Never. I try to avoid it on it, but I feel like some days I'm like, I'm gonna chaos. Let's just like make my life hard. I tweeted out I should write a book called "You Should Go to Church Even If You Don't Believe in Any of It," and makes me making the argument that like there's the evidence on this is exceedingly clear. By the way, your mental health increases the more you go to a house of worship. Your political tolerance increases the more you go to a house of worship. You participate in politics the more you go to a house of worship. You generate more social capital by being a member of a house of worship. You're more generous. You're more volunteering if you go to a house of worship. Like there's so much positive stuff in the literature about church attendance by itself. Now there are other parts about religion that go the other way. That like belief can make you more intolerant. So it's a careful balance for sure. I don't think people fully realize like there's this growing divide in American society that is really troubling to me about that the people that are dropping out of everything and the people who aren't. We're seeing a rising number of people who say their religion is nothing in particular, which means they're not saying they're atheist or agnostic, but they're also not saying they're Protestant or Catholic either. They're just looking at religion and goes, no, I don't want any of that. Those people are actually much more likely to say their politics are other, or their political ideology is other. They're the least likely to participate in the political process, whether it be protests or marches or going to school board meetings. They have the lowest level of education. And you think about it, like all those things are like knitted together in like the social fabric of America. Is like if you don't trust people, you don't trust politicians, you don't trust pastors, you don't trust the leader of the Elks or the Moose or the VFW. You don't trust anybody. You don't trust your professor. You don't go to college because you don't. Those people they're gonna do something bad to me. They're gonna fail me because I'm a bad. They don't like me or whatever it is. That is actually a really caustic way to go through life because now you're not building those social connections with anyone who can maybe get you to that next level of economic success in America or social success. What educated people realize, and I don't even think they're like cognizant of this, the data says that people who are the most likely to go to church this Sunday are people with college degrees making between $60,000 and $100,000 a year. What they understand is what you just described, Sam, which is the idea of like, if I go to church, I'm building these informal networks there with a veterinarian and an insurance agent and a car dealer and, all these people that I might need, a dentist at some point in my life who I can call personally and say, will you come help me with this situation that I'm in? That's how you move ahead. And educated people, because they're more trusting, are more likely to build these networks, and life works easier for them because they've established these networks. And you know what a great place for these networks are? Your local church. Like, if I'll give you an example. My dog, we had a little Yorkshire Terrier. She was 14 years old. She was kind of declining in health. I love my veterinarian. We had a really great relationship. We went to church together for a long time. My dog got really sick on a Friday night at 8 o'clock, which is like perfect time for an old dog to get sick, right? We woke up Saturday morning and we knew that this is probably the end for her, but my vet doesn't work on Saturday. I called my vet anyway, and you know what? She came to the office and euthanized my dog, just the two of us. She wouldn't have done that unless we had those bonds, those social capital bonds that we created with each other. That's just one example. I can give you 100 examples in my life of how those bonds have got me through. And I think that's what people miss. They don't see, we need to surface those kind of stories and say, this is why going to church matters from a very nuts and bolts practical thing. Even if you don't, she didn't ask me what I believed about Jesus before she went to the vet clinic with me. You know what I mean? She's like, I know you, I trust you, I like you, I want to help you. That's exactly what church does in a very real sense. And I think people who are on the outside of it don't realize all the secondary benefits you get from being part of a house of worship.
Yeah, and I think this also gets to this biblical concept of the church being a strong spiritual presence for the community.
Mm-hmm.
At West Bradenton, we call ourselves a neighborhood church for the nations. Now, neighborhood implying, hey, we're here for the people right around us. Nations implying the Great Commission and going to the ends of the earth, but also any and every kind of person. So I was out on my run this morning. I met somebody who I'd met before. She's another runner, and I stopped her this time to brag about the ultra marathon that I ran, because that's what we do. We have
Mm-hmm.
to talk to people about the races we run, and I could tell she was just not. She wasn't with it. And what I learned was that her son had committed suicide,
Oh man.
And yeah, and so I'm like, okay, let's put a pause on the bragging and let's deal with something very, very real.
Hmm.
And doesn't go to church. And I was like, hey, I don't know what you believe, but you need people. Like you need people, and we've got people to help you. And I wasn't proselytizing.
Hmm.
Although had I had the opportunity to tell her about Christ, I would have.
Sure.
But my concern was you don't need to do this alone. Like
Yeah.
you need a good counselor, you need a good psychiatrist. She had that. And I said, like, you need some people to walk with you.
Hmm.
And I could tell she was genuinely you know, glad to get that offer.
Yeah.
And I gave her my information and all that. Told her I was a pastor. I was very clear about what I was doing. I wasn't trying to hide anything. My point is, the church should fill that role for people.
Yes.
Even if that person doesn't believe what you believe, even if that of course we want to share Christ. Of course we want to fulfill the Great Commission, but we also just want to be there for people, regardless of whatever decision they make.
We want to be decent human beings, Sam, at the end of the day.
Yes, yeah, and we've lost that. And I've never been a fan of those who have very gleefully cheered for the decline of cultural Christianity in our
Mhm.
nation. Again, I totally understand the theological implications of unregenerate church membership. I
Yes.
totally understand that. And that was a problem that needed to be dealt with. But I think we threw the baby out with the bathwater.
So in the Jewish faith, if someone dies, you're instructed to say a prayer called the Kaddish twice a day, and the Talmud says that you have to have 12 people with you when you say the Kaddish twice a day. And the theory there is very simple. Like, I love how spiritual things are not spiritual things at the end. They're very like practical, earthy things. Like, just like, what that's forcing you to do is not be alone in your grief, which is so incredibly important, but also create informal connect, like informal opportunities for you. Hey, do you want to go out to, we'll say the Kaddish at 6. Do you want to go to dinner afterwards? Like that's the magic of church. Like, that's the magic of social organizations, is like this is why like all remote work is, I think, inherently bad, is because like the water cooler talk, the passing someone in the hallway and having a 5 or 10 minute conversation. There's actually a really great paper that said, like, what great way to increase your happiness is to have those kind of connections that you just described, Sam. Like the fleeting, quick, somewhat superficial, often like just hello, how are you, how are the kids, how the family conversations. Though you don't need to have like deep dive conversations multiple times a day, just little touch points, little 3 5 minute conversations with people that are in your sort of like outer circle ish of friends will elevate your mood, will relieve your anxiety. I think we forget, like, when you're walking out of church, you don't have to be the first one out the door. Hang out, sit, stand, talk to someone for 10 minutes about what's going on in life. You might actually get, not to belittle what the pastor does during the sermon, Sam, but you actually might get more uplift and more like long-term happiness from that conversation after church than you got during the church service. And at the end of the day, from a pastoral perspective, who cares? Like, what works as long as it works. Let's be okay with the idea that church is more than just when we start and when we finish the service. It's everything that goes along with being part of that religious community.
I really want to take a side trail here on William James and the great American philosophy of pragmatism,
Yeah.
which people use that term and have no idea what it really is.
Yeah.
But what you just said, if it works, you are being a wonderful pragmatic philosopher there, Ryan. For those of you who have studied your philosophy and understand the philosophy of William James. Uh, all right. Before I get too nerdy here, which I'm in good company with Ryan on that,
Mm.
um, you would expect evangelicals to be the most trusting group if this social capital thing is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So why are evangelicals more skeptical?
I think it has to do at some level with politics. Like, conservatives tend to be more individualistic. I know I'm talking in broad strokes here, so obviously I'm not like, oh, I'm not a Republican who believes in, like, liberals tend to be more collectivist and think about like the greater good, and in the Republican ethos in America is very much like, I'm going to rise and fall on my own merits. And the liberal ethos is like, no, 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 high tides raises all boats, right? Like if one of us fails, we all fail. And I think like that individualistic ethic is actually deeply related to trust. It's like, I can't trust anybody else, so I'm going to figure out how to be successful. The American dream is like me building a company out of nothing with really no help from anybody. Remember a couple years ago, like where Obama got hit a bunch of things, we built that. You know, like when you have a business and there was a road that got built, we as Americans say we built that road. Conservatives bristled a lot against that, saying, no, 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 I built my great business. I think that like tension is like key to the political divide in America, but it's also key to the trust divide too. I think generally speaking, evangelical, and also you got to think about evangelical theology, right? Like, which is imbued with the idea that we're all sinners, that we're all pretty terrible people in need of redemption. And we're reminded of that in our own lives on a very regular basis in a lot of evangelical churches. So I think that you extrapolate that out and say, well, if I'm a terrible person, that means other people don't need to be trusted. And so I think it creates this like internal skepticism, right? Of like, we're all bad people in need of a savior, but we're all bad people. And I just don't think liberals think of it that way.
Yeah, I call my children wretched, depraved little creatures all the time. So I am a good I would call myself a conservative evangelical. So I fit the mold, and I would also consider myself very individualistic. So I think what you have described is true. And I think that there's honestly, if we could take those two perspectives of collectivism and individualism and keep the tension there while advancing together, I think there's a lot of good in that. We've kind of lost that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and because the people who built their businesses, the vast majority of them built it because of social capital.
Oh,
That's how those businesses grew. Did they do the work? Yes. Should other
yes.
people take credit for that work? No, they should not. And I think that's why people bristled at Obama's comment.
Yeah.
But the none of those businesses, for the most part, those businesses don't get built without social capital.
They don't get built without American infrastructure too. Like, let's be clear about that. Like having roads and bridges and septic systems and all the sidewalks allow these things to. So it's like the thing is, you can't be like a black and white thinker on these things. And I think that's the problem is like I think people have swung where they just don't see any merit in the other argument from the other side. It's like no, the best answers, at least my perception is always like the best answer is like a nice mix of both extremes together. Like yes, you were successful. Yes, you worked hard. And I am not minimizing your hard work and your determination and your ingenuity and you're finding a product market fit and all those things. But you also can't deny that if you had the exact same hardworking mentality, but you were born in Somalia, you wouldn't be where you are right now. Full stop. So you gotta both appreciate your hard work, but also appreciate the circumstances that surround you that allow you to be the best version of yourself. I those are two ideas that are hard to hold in tension, by the way. But I think we have to, as Americans, not to go too far afield. But the immigration debate is like, why were we born in America as opposed to being born in Uganda or North Korea? Like, there's got to be a more thought in there beyond just, well, I could make it anywhere. I don't know if that's true, man. Like, I think that's a very American mentality. Like, cream will rise every. No, that's not always the case. I think what's beautiful and brilliant about America is the cream rises here. We've created a system and an infrastructure that allows you to fulfill your dreams if you want to fulfill them. That is an amazing thing, but also recognizing that other people on earth don't have the same opportunities that you have. And the opportunities in America were created by the way, institutional trust and interpersonal trust and social capital that's been part of our history for over 200 years now. You stand on the shoulders of giants. That's why you got to where you got. But you also got there because you worked hard too. Both things can be true.
I am there with you, and we need more social capital, not less, to get
Yes.
back to that day of being able to hold some different ideologies in tension and together, and make each other better together. So, last question as we kind of close out: what's the future? Like, where are we going with social capital? And I know that you're more inclined to analyze previous trends, but let's put our regression analysis hat on and let's
Mm-hmm.
make some future projections. What do you next 5 years, next
Mm-hmm.
10 years? I know 20, 30 years out, it's almost impossible to predict. But what do you think is going to happen?
I think we're going to see more and more people realize that they didn't understand the full flower of what religion does in American society until it's gone, which is unfortunate, right? I think part of what I do is to say, like, I'm trying to get ahead of that and saying, like, no, this is going to be bad in 5 or 10 years when the after school program goes away and the weekend feeding program goes away and all these ministries that churches do that you don't think about. The Alcoholics Anonymous meet in the church gymnasium once a week. Where are they going to meet? Like, these are problems that will only become problems when the churches go away and there's no one to fill the gap. And there won't be anyone to fill the gap, by the way. There's just no evidence that there's any organizations in America that have any organizational capacity to do what church does. It's just not there. And so what I hope to happen is one thing. First off, that we don't get to that point where things get really bad from the social safety net standpoint. But two, a lot of people begin to realize that there is value in religion, even if you don't believe in all of it or even some of it. That we're going to see people come. And I think the church needs to be aware of the fact that it's okay that people come and they don't say the creed or they don't say the prayer. They just stand there and they want to be part of something. Billy Graham's most famous hymn was "Just As I Am," right? Like, take people where they are. Now, that I think that's the core message of Christianity, right? Which is like, God accepts you for who you are, but he wants you to be better. Like, he's not done with you yet. And I think the church has to think about that when people come. Like, you don't have to don't make them sign a doctrinal statement and don't force them towards membership and you got to come to catechism classes or, like whatever you got. Take them where they are and just be happy they're there. Like, it's got to be a both and thing. People got to be willing to make the weirdness of showing up to church the first time, but the church needs to be willing to say, hey, we're not going to shove a comment card in your hand and ask you to do a contact, and the pastor's going to call you up on Monday morning. No. Chill out. Just chill for a while. Let those people marinate. And if they come back 5 or 6 times, you know what? Maybe make a little baby step toward them, right? That's what they want. Don't inundate them and overwhelm them. I think churches need to get better at that. But I also think people, the average American, especially, it's going to happen with educated Americans because they're seeing this more and more, like in the discourse. They're going to see the value of religion and they're going to come. But you got to have a good marriage there. Church has got to be willing to accept you, and you got to be willing to make the first step. If that happens, I think we might see a religious revival, which might not be the revival that like a lot of classic evangelicals think about, where hundreds of people come down for the altar call, but the pews might start looking a little fuller on a Sunday morning. And I and you, Sam, don't believe that's a bad thing. I actually think that's a very good thing for a whole bunch of reasons, not just for the church, but for American democracy too.
There you go. And by the way, if you do visit West Bradenton Baptist Church and fill out a comment card, you will get a call from me on Monday morning. Or Monday. I usually do Monday evening, Monday or Tuesday evening, because people work, obviously. So, but I do understand the spirit of what you're saying. Hey, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Want to thank our sponsor, Tyndale, for giving us the Filament Bible app. This is the best Bible app that's out there. If you don't have this, you need to go get it. filamentbibles.com is where you can go to find out more. I have used the Filament Bible app myself. I recommend it whenever anyone asks me at my church, like, hey, what Bible app should I use? This is the one. I love it because if you have a filament-enabled Bible, all that you have to do is scan the top of the page, and then it takes you to all sorts of resources. It's super easy to use. It really is just that simple. If you can use a camera on your phone, you can use this. So it just scans that page, and then you get videos and devotionals and interactive maps, infographics, and it's all tied to the text that's there on the page. So as you're reading and you don't understand something, pull out your Filament Bible app. Or if the sermon's bad, like it is at West Bradenton mostly, pull out your Filament Bible app and go scan that page and learn more. Thank you, Tyndale, for sponsoring today's episode. I want to thank Ryan Burge as well for being on the Burge Report. He always gives us very good information. We'll have another one coming to you soon. We'll see you then.